Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It is FBC Radio Live. It is February the 7th, 2023. And John, you know what? I'm still not feeling the hype right now. I'm not feeling it. It's quiet. There's no really big storylines, I guess, going into the game, and no one seems to want to talk about the X's and O's, it seems like. So, yeah, 5 days out, and we got some sort of football game coming up on Sunday. Am I the only one who feels this way?
No, I'm right there with you, Ian. I think maybe it's because both teams have won Super Bowls recently. So they've had success. I mean, Philadelphia is interesting because they're back here with a different quarterback and a head coach. We hear the Travis Kelce, Jason Kelce, the brothers playing against each other. They're both on offense, so they're not really playing against each other. And it's Andy Reid against his old team, and those storylines are tired and will be forgotten. But, just hoping for a good game because since the Super Wild Card round, the playoffs have been kind of, not that great. We've had, I believe, 6 straight games that have gone under the posted total. We haven't had a lot of exciting games, especially in the divisional round and the conference championship games. Yeah, Kansas City, Cincinnati was a good game, not a great game, kind of marred by a lot of crazy calls. And I keep saying this, Philadelphia, San Francisco in the NFC felt like an exhibition game once Brock Brady went out and was, one-sided. So there's not a great build-up to this, but maybe they'll surprise us and have a good game.
Yeah, and look, I mean, part of it is, too, like you said, the brother versus brother thing. This is really the only reason I would get hyped for that is if it was that remake of that Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, Double Take or Double Impact or whatever. I don't know. They're all the same. I mean, whatever one where he had a twin brother.
Yeah.
not the one like not Kickboxer where he had a brother who looked completely different from him and neither of them spoke similarly, and they just passed that off as, oh, I grew up in Europe. That's why I have an accent. I love those 80s movies, man. I really do. Anyways, if you haven't seen Kickboxer, highly recommended. One of my favorite movies. I love it. Anyways, storylines. So the Kelce versus Kelce thing is okay. Yeah. Am I really hyped for it? Not really. I mean, obviously the biggest storyline and really the one that's the most impactful is the fact that this is the first time the two African American quarterbacks will be facing off against each other, and that is important. And I think that is a key storyline that obviously is getting play. But when it comes to your run of the mill hype trains that you have going into the Super Bowl, these ones are kind of duds. And look, I mean, part of it too is you're getting outrageous narrative takes, and I've seen this already a few times. And look, it's popped up a few times. Patrick Mahomes' legacy, talking about, he would be in the conversation for greatest of all time. It's like, okay, no. See, this is where I tune you out. This is where I'm like, all right, I don't really need to pay attention to this. Now, like I've said before, if you're talking about a more appropriate legacy conversation when it comes to Patrick Mahomes, that I can get behind and that I can get hyped up about because, believe it or not, John, I love to see greatness in this league. I know. People may be like, no way. It's not Tom Brady. Of course he doesn't like. No, of course I love greatness in this league and I like watching it. I just like, well, you know what I like more, John, is appropriate reaction to that greatness. What I don't like is, this craziness that we go through, what seems like every few years with someone. This time around is Patrick Mahomes. Level out those conversations, then we can have some good build up before this game because there's some great legacy talk when it comes to Patrick Mahomes. Unfortunately, what I've seen most of is just, and this is something we're used to, not just with him, but with everything. Everything's just over the top, one way or the other, and that kind of kills the hype for this game because, well, you get the feeling that there's manufactured hype or manufactured narratives, and that really takes away from the game that really has a lot of storylines to begin with, especially from an X's and O's standpoint.
I think obviously the weekend is about Patrick Mahomes. He's going to win the NFL MVP on Thursday night, which will be his second. If he wins on Sunday, he's 2-1 in 3 Super Bowl appearances in 5 years. That's pretty remarkable. Does he crash the top 10 of all time, or at least since the Super Bowl era? Maybe he does. I have like Roger Staubach at number 10, and his greatest Staubach was, and he was great. he only really played 9 years. So now you can start talking about, well, a guy in 5 years accomplished pretty much as much, if not more than Staubach. So maybe he moves into like number 10. He would have 2 more Super Bowls than Marino, 1 more Super Bowl than Rodgers and Favre, 2 more Super Bowls, than other great quarterbacks that never won. So then you could put him into that top 10. Absolutely. I still can't put him in the top 5 because now he's going to supplant guys that just had longer careers. But at least the narrative, I think, would be apropos for that. But to start calling him the greatest of all time, no, that's a silly argument. Let the guy's career play out, maybe to 10 years instead of 5, and then we can start to talk about that maybe.
Well, again, and this is what's wild about how we talk about sports now, where it's like doing less is apparently enough to surpass the previous, and it's not just about Super Bowl titles, but to your point, and something I've hammered home for a long time, part of greatness is longevity, and if you can do something great for 5 years, that's awesome. That's good for you. But we're talking about, in the case of obviously Brady and some of these other guys, but specifically Brady, you're talking 23 years of greatness that you have to somehow surpass. And again, it's not about, well, if he throws 1 more yard, or if it's you have to come close to, and in a way surpass, maybe not technically every single thing, but you know what I mean. There's so much that goes into that conversation, and it's the reason why it's so inappropriate right now, and will be for really a long time, short of Patrick Mahomes winning 5 straight Super Bowls, and then all of a sudden, okay, you know what? You win 5 straight. Yeah, I give.
Yeah.
Deal with it. We'll talk about it then. But even then, I mean, you're talking about something so absurd that we'll cross that bridge if we ever get there, and that's a really big if, and that's again a massive if. So yeah, I think those are obviously some of the reasons why this game just isn't maybe landing with people. It feels more localized coverage, so like obviously Kansas City fans are going to eat up what's happening right now. They're sitting here saying like, oh, this is great hype, Travis Kelce, is he going to surpass him and Gronk? Here's the thing: him and Patrick Mahomes could come close to surpassing Gronk and Brady for touchdown production in the playoffs. That's a great storyline. But again, what's it being talked about? Oh, this is the greatest this, greatest that, greatest we've never seen this, never seen that. Well, no, and you're only really playing to Kansas City fans. So if you want to grab the national media, national attention, well, you got to kind of give them actual coverage and not these trumped up storylines, because that's kind of what we're getting at, and this is where we're at right now with these teams. And look, John, there you can kind of sense it. You can kind of, especially if they win on Sunday, the national, I guess, love affair with Patrick Mahomes is waning. Like, people outside of just like the key fan bases, the Patriots, the Buccaneers, they're rivals essentially. Outside of those fans, you're starting to get other, I guess, neutral fans starting to be like, all right, guys, let's calm down with the hype a little bit. Let's calm down with the media love fest when it comes to everything Patrick Mahomes does. And look, that happens when you win a lot. The general consensus starts to swing against you. But I do think that other people are starting to take notice of kind of. And again, this isn't just about Patrick Mahomes. We see it in everything we hear about in sports. I mean, hell, you see it all the time in the NBA, and we don't even have time to get to a lot of that stuff. So, but in this sense, and since it's the Super Bowl, what we're building up to, this is kind of what we're getting to the nth degree now. And I think that tunes out a lot of fans, which in turn tunes out a lot of the hype, because, well, yeah, you're going to get hype from the fan bases that are involved with the Super Bowl, of course, but you want to get hype from outside those two regions, and I don't think you're getting too much of that right now.
Right. Oh yeah, that's the key to this, right? What the other markets do. Philadelphia is a huge market, great fan base, very loud. They're going to take over Phoenix, I would assume, within the next couple of days. They're a very boisterous group. Kansas City is more of a Midwestern feel, but very passionate about their team. But yeah, you need to get those great ratings in New York and in Los Angeles and Chicago, Boston, a lot of the top 10 markets, the neutral places, as you say. That's going to be very important. The ratings will be good because the NFL could put on anything, and the ratings are going to be good. It's going to be the most watched game in the history of the league? Probably not, although, the ratings are kind of funny that way because there's just more people that are able to watch now. But then there's also different ways to find out how they watch. So, by the time Sunday kicks off, we'll all be enthused and ready to watch, and then we'll see how the game plays out and what kind of entertainment it is. And again, I still think the biggest narrative is Patrick Mahomes. Is he going to be 2-1 in the Super Bowl or 1-2 in the Super Bowl? That's going to be determined around 10 o'clock on Sunday night.
Well, and here's the thing too: if he loses, and this is what drives me nuts about some of the commentary, right? Talking about being one of your pal Nick right there likes to call him the greatest postseason performer ever. He hasn't been great in the Super Bowl. Now all of a sudden, if he goes out and has another 3 quarters in a loss where he's just subpar, all of a sudden you're talking about 80+% of his time in the Super Bowl he's played more like Peyton Manning, which isn't necessarily a good thing in this situation. Everything else, if you play like Peyton Manning, you're good. But Peyton wasn't great in the Super Bowl either. You can't convince me because, right now, I think Patrick Mahomes has had by far a worse performance in any Super Bowl than Brady has ever had, even in losses, even in games that he wasn't great. I'm not saying he was great in every game, but that loss to Tom Brady and the Buccaneers was far worse than anything he's ever had. And to be honest, you can honestly, I can probably make a case that every single win, at the very least, was better than the win that Patrick Mahomes had. So, you know what I mean? The idea that, he's this greatest performer or whatever, if he drops to 1-2, all of a sudden, that's a big that's a big thing in the narrative driven world. Let's put it this way.
Big difference, yeah.
Oh yeah, big difference. And even look, even if he he would have to have a great performance. Like I say it all, people are like, oh, he's already passed Aaron Rodgers, this, that, and the other. Well, it's like, look, based on only playing in the 2 Super Bowls so far, we don't know what's going to happen this Sunday. Aaron Rodgers was by far better than Patrick Mahomes at any point in either of these 2 Super Bowls. So, yeah, has Aaron only got to 1 and 1-1? Sure. But, if that's what you're hinging it on, well, yeah, he was better in his 1 Super Bowl than Mahomes was in his 2. So, but like I said, Sunday still hasn't happened. We have no idea what's going to happen Sunday, but, it could swing, and it could swing pretty big because, all of a sudden, you don't necessarily get that greatest mark. I know people say Super Bowls don't matter, but they really do. They really do. You always catch those people, John, who say that wins and Super Bowls don't matter when it comes to quarterback, eventually saying something that supports that Super Bowls and wins matter. It always is the case. That's why I always laugh at QB wins with a Z aren't a win or aren't a quarterback stat. No, because you can't dance around the question enough. And eventually you can ask them about okay, then what makes a reception a quarterback stat or a pass completion or whatever. And then you eventually have them contradict themselves. So it's kind of a fun exercise if anyone out there is bored and wants to, really get things going on Twitter, just little
sure,
tips,
they do matter. The Super Bowl wins. Yeah, they do matter. I mean, that's why I put Rodgers and Favre ahead of Marino, 3 incredibly talented quarterbacks who you can take a look at and say they underachieved a little bit, or at least their teams did throughout their careers. I mean, Rodgers has been to 1 Super Bowl, Marino to 1, and Favre to only 2. That doesn't make sense for quarterbacks for that caliber. But at least Favre and Rodgers did win a Super Bowl where Marino didn't. So if I'm ranking them, I put those guys ahead of Marino.
And here's the thing. And I believe this, teams do not underachieve in spite of their quarterback. That doesn't mean the quarterback's the reason why they underachieve. But like I said, we've had this conversation so many times before, but look at some of the great seasons the Packers have, and no one's going to sit there and deny that Rodgers wasn't great or he wasn't a Super Bowl MVP and that the team wasn't as good as some of the other great teams in the league, maybe defensively, whatever. But at the end of the day, you can trace their losses in the biggest games. Well, the quarterback play had a hand in it. And it doesn't mean it was the whole reason. It doesn't mean that he's an awful quarterback. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. But, that's the thing. Like, that's why wins and losses matter to quarterbacks. That's why in a vacuum, obviously you can narrow down one game and say, well, this guy didn't deserve to win. Yes, you're going to find examples of that. Just like you're going to find examples of quarterbacks completing passes that they had no business completing and really were nothing of the, it was not because of anything they did, but because of their teammates around them. So yes, you can find situations and examples, and I know Trent Dilfer is always the go-to example. But the reality of it is, like, in the big picture, when you look at every factor, everything, wins matter. And you're not going to sit there and tell me that any of the quarterbacks right now in the top 10 wins list is not a great quarterback. So,
Mhm.
so we'll see. We'll see how that all plays out. Speaking of great quarterbacks, and I can't go a day without mentioning the guy. Tom Brady had his Let's Go podcast, his first one since his second retirement, and one that I think is going to stick. I'll always hope that my hope is that he eventually comes back. I don't think it's going to happen, John. This is just a pipe dream for me. Um, he's done for good. But this was his first podcast after the retirement, and he had some star-studded guests on there, including Peyton Manning, and including one Bill Belichick. Look, I felt it at the time. I continue to feel it that the whole rivalry between the two was always more of a product of the media and not so much anything. I don't think it was anything more than just working together with someone for 20 years. If I worked with someone for 20 years, yeah, you know what? Over that time, I'm going to have disagreements. I don't think that has anything to do with some sort of rivalry or rift between the two. And I think um, whether or not you think this is 100% genuine, I happen to believe it because I have no reason not to. Um, look, I think the two of them, Belichick and Brady, and Brady said it on his podcast. It was never about Brady versus Belichick because, like, you can't, they were a tandem. You know what I mean? He didn't ever see it that way because they appreciated what they did for each other, and will always do that. And I think Belichick's expression of calling Brady the greatest player and greatest this, greatest that. I mean, that's something he just doesn't throw out there. I mean, you can probably count on your one hand how many times he's called a specific player the greatest, and really you go immediately to Lawrence Taylor, a guy that he coached and a lot of people believe may or may not be the greatest defensive player of all time. Belichick feels obviously that way about Brady, and then this is only reinforcing things he said during the remember a few years ago when the NFL did its greatest players of all
Mhm.
time, and Belichick
Mhm.
and Brady were a part of that panel at one point. So, uh, like I said, I mean, just a nice interview, something you're gonna hear a lot of, I'm sure, now because he's not playing football, and certainly he's gonna get some airtime with some people when he opens up and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it was a fun conversation to listen to, and certainly one that. Um, it might temper some of this, uh, you know, energy when it comes to talking Brady versus Belichick, but my guess is probably not, and this will probably be twisted into, well, what do you expect him to say? So what
Well, I
do
think
I
it's
expect you to say to John?
I think it's the case. Obviously, quarterback coaches have had weird, relationships in the past. I mean, Bill Walsh and Joe Montana didn't always see eye to eye. That Terry Bradshaw and Chuck Noll
And
never
that's not
saw eye to
that's not a
eye.
bad thing though, too.
No, no,
And
it's
that's a,
probably
yeah.
best at some point for the coach to push back a little bit. Roger Staubach always felt that Tom Landry constrained him, and Landry just felt it was the system that worked, and Staubach was just to be plugged in. Coaches have egos too. They think they're the reason why the team is prepared and ready to win. The quarterbacks have egos as well, and I think it's becoming more and more a quarterbacks league. We see that, but yeah, I mean, if you're together 20 years with anyone, there's going to be some disagreements, and as you said, that can be a very healthy thing. I think maybe they both wanted to at some point try to do it without each other, and Brady went ahead and won a Super Bowl without Belichick. So check mark to him. But yeah, I mean, I don't think these guys hate each other. I think that they just have that quarterback coach relationship, which is very, very clunky at times.
Yeah, I was going to say, look, I mean, Brady lasted in a relationship longer with Bill Belichick than he did with Giselle. I
Yeah,
mean, like, I'm not trying to make a joke. I mean, I guess it could be
it's true.
considered a joke and somewhat topical, but I mean, it's true. Like, I mean, he had a long marriage that lasted just a little over half the time that he spent with Bill Belichick. And, like I said, I ask anyone out there, all these fans that were always talking, kind of really hyping up the rivalry. It's like, first of all, have you ever been in a relationship for 20 years, whether it's a job or a girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever? And then if the answer is yes, tell me with a straight face that it was flawless. Even if you love that person or you love that job, tell me it was flawless. And to each person, they would not be able to do it. So yeah, I always kind of laughed at like people that really kind of overhype that. And look, what I think happened is and continues to happen is they just have the two of them have an immense amount of respect for one another. They're both you called Brady a psychopath all the time. Brady Belichick's the same way. You
Hmm.
don't have the amount of success and you don't do this for as long as you've done it without being a little bit of a psychopath. I mean, because that's what this job requires. It's 24/7. It's I mean, not just attention to detail, John. You're talking levels of attention that I just can't fathom the amount of detail that Belichick and obviously to an extension Brady goes through just for each season or each week or each opponent or whatever. So I think the two of them just have just the utmost respect for one another, and I think that's always been the case. And at the time, like, and I said it, like, look, Belichick made an estimation, something that many fans and coaches were probably saying even prior to that. Hell, I know people were saying it prior because people are saying that Brady should retire when he was 36. So what Belichick did was make an estimation, make a guess that, well, you know what? We're not going to be able Brady, he's not going to be able to keep up this level of production. And you know what? He was wrong. If you ask him about it, I'm sure he'd say, you know what? We probably thought we weren't going to get 3 good years out of him, like Tampa did. And maybe, the Patriots are in a different situation than they are now, in terms of competing and whatnot. Maybe they win another Super Bowl. I don't know. I don't know. But I think he made a mistake. Not that again, I think he would, if you asked him, he's like, did you believe that Brady was going to be able to play it at, certainly at an MVP level in 2021? And, you can make an argument he was at that level in 2020. Obviously, he didn't win it, and I don't think he deserved to win it that year. But um, I'm pretty sure if Belichick had a do over, maybe he puts that exit off a year or two for Brady.
The only problem I have with Belichick is there was no plan. I mean, because
Yeah.
okay, Brady's let go, and now you sign Cam Newton in June, and that was the plan. Like that doesn't make any sense. Where these other great quarterbacks that moved on, Favre went to Rodgers, Montana went to Young. So you again, that
Well,
doesn't happen all
and
the time. But
this is probably on it. I'll just butt in real quick. I'll let you go again. But he's probably he probably this is where his ego probably took over, and he probably thought that ultimately Brady was going to come back for one of their 1/2 year deals. One of the Patriots deal where it's bad. There's an option and all that stuff. So that's where I think he erred, where he thought we're going to play hardball. This is going to be our final offer. Ultimately, he's going to end up coming back, and obviously that was not the case because another team was ready, willing, and able to give him what he wanted.
yeah, they kind of lost me after the guy threw for 505 yards in a Super Bowl, was the league MVP, was still a top 3 quarterback in the league, and you were constantly contending. And then they offered him a 1-year deal with incentives.
Yeah,
that would have. If I was, I mean, Tom Brady, I'm sure was upset about that, and he kind of keeps things close to the vest, but that to me is an insult. I mean, you don't give a player that ilk incentives.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need incentives. He is going to be highly competitive, focused, and is going to look to win more than anything. You're going to throw incentives out there. That's when they lost me. I was like, this is an insult to the greatest quarterback ever.
Yeah, and look, I mean, you can argue too that they didn't really do an adequate job, obviously, in 2018 to um, replace what was now. I mean, again, they go out and win a Super Bowl, but this was not a team that you could have recharged a little bit more and focused more. And look,
Mm-hmm.
it was never the focus for the Patriots throughout. And this is one of the reasons why Brady's so great and what's so silly about this. I mean, revisionist history is not even appropriate. I think it's a bastardizing history is what I think is happening. But like, people are now talking about how Brady's always had these great weapons. And I'm like, look, like there's been opportunities for the Patriots to go swing for the fences. Look what some of these other teams did for their quarterback, even before this now obviously rush to go do that. I mean, every team is going out and getting weapons for their top tier quarterback now, except for the Patriots, ironically. Um, so the only difference now is they don't have Tom Brady to kind of elevate those around him. And that's not to say that guys like Julian Edelman weren't great, Danny Amendola weren't great, but I got to say that, I think they're, if you're going to ask me, put a gun to my head, I think they're more a product of Tom Brady than the other way. Certainly they're the way around. So um, they didn't do an adequate job to refill some of those players. You get rid of Brandon Cooks. I don't know why. I mean, again, we'd have to go back to, everything that was happening, but a guy that looked like he fit in well with Brady and was certainly a guy that added a different element to the offense. So, and despite all that, they still went out and won a Super Bowl in 2018. Now, you can sit there and say, well, look at 2019. Well, okay, so they go out and get Antonio Brown. That obviously didn't work, and I've softened my stand. I still think they hold on to Antonio Brown that year. They probably win the Super Bowl just because they were really good. They just at the end they just ran out of bodies. But you're going out, you're getting an older Demaryius Thomas. I mean, this is like a Joey Galloway all over again. Like, oh, it's a great name. This is pre Randy Moss, by the way. The Joey Galloways or the Doug Gabriels. Oh, he's the guy that's kind of like Randy Moss, or he's hyped up to be like Randy Moss. So we'll go get him. So that's what
he
Brady,
traded a second round pick for Mohamed Sanu, which didn't work out.
And that that was a desperation heave that I don't necessarily fault them for that. I don't think anyone, even the most pessimistic fan, I don't think would have expected that Thomas Caberlet level of unproduction. Anyone who's close to Boston sports understands exactly what I'm talking about. But at least in that case, that they won in spite of that. Sanu was just another guy that just didn't produce for this team down the stretch in 2019. And that was a product of ultimately not doing a good enough job putting, weapons, so to speak, around a guy that was just coming off an MVP, his third straight Super Bowl, an MVP in 2017, his third straight Super Bowl in 2018 appearance. So yeah, it's unfortunate. And look, I don't, this is more about a time of reflecting back and looking back and appreciating, everything that we had to watch and see the success. But it'll still always sting that he didn't spend his whole year, in my opinion, with the Patriots. And I thought there was an opportunity to do so. And I think you're right, John. I think it goes back to that contract offer post 2017. I think that was the thing, that the catalyst, so to speak, to get us to where we eventually were at the end of the 2019 season, and that was Brady saying goodbye to the Patriots. So,
yeah, the Yankees did that with Joe Torre. I mean, I'm not comparing a baseball manager to an NFL quarterback, but I am. But Joe Torre was obviously, a great manager. They won so much with him, and then towards the end of his career, they started putting incentives in. Well, we'll give you a bonus if you win the American League East. If you move on to the American League Championship Series, there'll be another bonus. And he pretty much just said, thanks, but no thanks. Like, I've kind of proven my worth. Now you're going to throw incentives in there. Like, that's better for someone that's not proven. And I'm not a big fan of incentives anyway. I think maybe playing time incentives are good because, get the players out on the field and they can contribute that way. But if you have to start paying, if you think you have to motivate a guy with incentives, I think you're wrong when it comes to a guy like Brady. I mean, he's pretty self-motivated.
Yeah. And again, to your point, he's never, and that's the thing, he's never been a huge money guy. You know what I mean? Obviously, he's not asking to I want to, go 10 million above the largest contract. No, it was, I think his asks were reasonable. And he
wanted the Drew Brees contract, right? 2 years, 25 million, which, guys are making 45, 50 million.
That's what he got
now
with Tampa Bay.
Yeah. What's to me, I mean, again, 25 million is a lot of money to us, but NFL teams to secure the best quarterback ever for 2 more years, you just do it.
Well, and look, I mean, like I said, at the end of the day, I don't think that in the moment in that time, I'm sure Brady, Belichick were both frustrated, but that's something that very easily over time, like you pull yourself away from that situation, and you're going to kind of soften on all that. So, all right, that's going to do it. We will be back on Thursday, and we're going to really again start to kind of gear up for the game. And hopefully by then, John, hopefully by then, I'm hoping that there's a lot more national hype, so to speak, for the Super Bowl. And at least we're getting, kind of geared up for, again, like I said, I think this is going to be a great game. I mean, two really good teams, two really good quarterbacks, two really good offenses, and some pretty good defense. So that sounds like the recipe for a pretty great classic Super Bowl. So let's hope. So, all right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Give us a follow on Twitter at FPC Radio Live and, of course, at Full Press NFL. Head over to fullpresscoverage.com to check out all the latest and greatest. And, of course, if you're a hockey fan, fullpresshockey.com. Check it out. Thank you, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.